Hello, everyone, and welcome to another broadcast from the Gate Church. This is Jeremy. Today, we are going to be taking a look at another attribute of love from 1 Corinthians 13, and I think this is a very essential one to really understanding just kind of the characteristics of God and just understanding who God is, and because of who God is, who we should be, and where we should come in our perspective. Because once you get God's perspective in your life and in the life of the world, even then, it really changes the way you see things. And obviously, all of this changing of perspective really comes from understanding God by actually knowing Him, by actually spending time with Him, by spending time in His Word and spending time like with Him in His presence. But we're going through 1 Corinthians 13, and we've been looking at the different attributes of love and how those relate to God, because God is love, even though, as I stated in the first video in this series, love is not God. So love is part of who God is, but I think once we need to define love in order to understand that, because once we start coming up with all these crazy definitions of love and what love means to us in that way, and not just how God's love works in our lives, but what love means to us, we start to get a skew of who God really is and how God really works in our lives and how God really works in the earth. So it's really important to have a good, solid definition, a good, solid foundation of that. And this is a really foundational principle in love and in God is God's kindness. Last week we talked about love is patient. This week, we are talking about love is kind, and we're going to look at the kindness of God. Now, the kindness of God, how Paul, who wrote this, would have understood it, is from the Hebrew perspective of the God of kindness, which whenever we look at kind of translations in the Bible, and we'll just go through just a quick little word thing in here, because it's really important to understand that it's not just kindness as far as like, oh, God does good things. Yes, and yes, He does, but it's so much more than that. It's so much more that if you look up like the Hebrew for kindness, or that is often translated as kindness or goodness, especially in the verse of Psalms 23:6, surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord and His presence forever. So that the mercy there is also kind of the root of the word that we have translated into loving kindness, and I'll probably get it close but not right. It's like hasad or something like that. People pronounce it different ways, but it's a really foundational. It's a really key word there that is used throughout the Old Testament, and it is a attribute of God. It's something that God is. It's what God does to His people. It's that we could almost translate it. We could almost relate it to grace, His goodness, His mercy. It's all of that wrapped up into one. It's everything that He does that He doesn't necessarily have to do. As far as from our perspective, the things that God does that is kind towards us. And I think that that's why whenever they were translating this in the first place, so I was trying to figure out where the word loving kindness came from, because it's also it's translated often as loving kindness. So I was trying to look up where that came from. And as far as I can tell, in my limited knowledge and limited searching, it kind of what I was thinking was true, is that they actually had to make up the word loving kindness, because kindness doesn't quite cut it and love doesn't quite cut it. So it's like, it's the loving kindness. It's His kindness out of His love, out of His nature, out of His just out of his heart, his choice out of his heart to do the good things for us, to do the good things that he does in the earth. And it's that attribute of God, it's that attribute of love is what we're looking at. And if you want to find this concept in New Testament, you can just look at Romans 11:22, because it's talking about Israel and how Israel was cut off. But then we are also invited into that. For if God did not spare the natural branches, neither will he spare you if you're guilty of the same offense. Then note and appreciate the gracious kindness and the severity of God. Severity towards those who have fallen, but God's gracious kindness towards you, if you continue in his grace and abide in his kindness. Otherwise, you too will be cut off. But look at this part. So, that sounds really harsh. That, okay, so, well, they're cut off. We're here. How is that kindness? And even those others, the fallen branches, if they do not persist in clinging to their unbelief, will be grafted in. So if they let go of their unbelief, that's a double negative there. So if they let go of their unbelief, they will be grafted in. For God has the power to graft them in again. And why? Because of his kindness. Verse 22, his gracious kindness towards you, if you abide in his kindness. Otherwise, you will be cut off as well. So it's whenever we abide, whenever we are led into this kindness that God gives us, and whenever we receive that, that's whenever we are able to be grafted into who he is. And it is just think about in your life, just the things that God has done that he doesn't have to do. That maybe you were, it's just crazy stuff. Like maybe you were just thinking about that'd be really nice. Something really nice to happen, and then God does it for you. I'll give you guys an example of just how I think God works, and God's kindness of just putting little things in your life, and even big things. But I really believe that this is the Lord in this, and it's just something so I saw a movie one time. If you guys don't know, I used to do a little bit of acting, and I've done stuff with movies. I won't tell you the person but anyways, so I saw a movie one time in theaters, and I was like, oh, it'd be great maybe to work with that person one day. And it was just a thought. It was just one of those random thoughts that I'm I don't even know why I'm having this thought, but because I don't know this person, I haven't seen them in a movie, but they seem like they'd be nice to work with. I've only seen them this once in this movie. It'd be nice to work with them one day. And turns out a couple years later, guess what? I lived in St. Mary's. They had a film commission there. I actually happened to live right across the street from the lady who was the head of the film commission, and I got a role in this movie that this person was in, and I ended up actually being cast as the friend of this person. So it's just one of those wow, God, you really did that. That's amazing. And if you guys want to look at some of the verses that talk about this, Psalms 119, 124, and we'll go through 128 just because it's 119. And like we talked about last week with 119, it's dealing a lot with God's commands, a lot with his commands and precepts. And whenever we're talking about love, Jesus says, those who love me will do my commands. So Psalm 119 is a good way, if you want to really learn love, to go and look at it and learn how to love God. So verse 124, deal with your servant according to your mercy and loving kindness, and teach me your statutes. I am your servant. Give me understanding, discernment, and comprehension, that I may know, discern, and be familiar with the character of your testimonies. It is time for the Lord to act, for they have frustrated your law. Therefore, I love your commandments more than gold, yes, more than refined gold. Therefore, I esteem as right all your precepts, and I hate every false way. So deal with me according to your loving kindness and teach me your statutes. So it's in the teaching of his statutes, the fact that you get to know what God is decreeing in the earth, the fact that you get to know what God has said is actually part of his loving kindness. And Psalms 119:88, revive me according to your loving kindness, so that I may keep the testimony of your mouth, so that I may speak what you have spoken in the earth. And this is how we do this, is we understand and we know God's loving kindness. So it works its way through us because we experience it, and we can also put it out. We can also put forth what we have experienced in the earth. And then I just really love Micah 6. Does the Lord, or we'll start in verse 7, does the Lord take pleasure in thousands of rams or in 10,000 rivers of oil? Shall I give him my firstborn for my wrongdoings, the fruit of my body for the sin of my soul? And he has told you, mortal one, what is good. And what does the Lord require of you but to do justice, love kindness, and walk humbly with your God? And the voice of the Lord will call to the city, and it is sound wisdom to fear your name. So like I was talking about fearing, the fear, the name of the Lord is kind of his goal in a lot of what he does, is to bring forth his name throughout the earth. But what does the Lord require? To do justice, to love kindness, and to walk humbly with our God. So whenever we love his kindness, we are able to do everything that he is commanding. We're able to have that heart of loving kindness. And it's not so much doing kind acts as it is, if you look at kind of the root words and all that mumbo jumbo. But if you look at it and you want to apply it to your heart, it's more about yielding your heart to the Lord, yielding your heart to his kindness, and yielding your heart to what he wants to be done in the earth. And that is how you have not just kindness as we know kindness, but that's how you have the loving kindness of the Lord. So you guys just apply that to your lives, apply that to your heart. Whenever you're praying, just pray like, Lord, let me know your loving kindness. Let me see your loving kindness. Let me see all the things that you've done in my life, all the things that you are doing in the lives of others, and everything that I can do to be a part of your loving kindness in the earth. So pray that. And next week, we will continue to look at 1 Corinthians 13, and I will see you guys later.